I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night, my heart pounding as if someone were punching it from the inside. I was in my small apartment in a relatively quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, one of those old buildings with thin walls where you can hear every move your neighbors make. But this time the sound was completely different. It was a faint, muffled creaking sound coming from the main entrance door. It was as if someone were trying hard to turn the key or messing with the lock very quietly, with an expertise that suggested experience. I sat up in bed, terrified, watching the door, my eyes wide in the darkness, listening to the sound of scratching on the door from the outside. It was about 3:30 a.m., and the apartment was a bit cold because I leave the window partially open in the summer. I heard another sound like a slight metallic friction. Then everything stopped for a few seconds. Then the sound returned, slower this time, as if the person were trying to ensure that no one heard him. I'd been living alone for 6 months since my breakup with my ex-girlfriend, and I wasn't expecting any visits, especially at this time. I got up quietly, my feet bare on the cold wooden floor, and walked with hesitant steps toward the door. I grabbed my phone, the battery was low. I thought about calling the police immediately, but what if it was just a drunk neighbor who got the wrong door? Or maybe stray cats were making the noise. But the sound was very precise and human. I stood behind the door, my breath held and my ear pressed against the wood. I heard a faint sigh from the outside, then a sound like a whisper, as if someone were talking to himself. I heard him say, "Quiet, quiet." The words were muffled, yet enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. I realized this was no mistake. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was completely dark, and I saw nothing but vague shadows. My memories drifted back to stories I'd heard on Reddit about suburban burglaries and thieves targeting single-occupancy apartments, waiting until the residents were asleep. I work a routine office job, barely pay the rent, and didn't have any valuables. I asked myself, why would they target my apartment? I started trembling from the fear that was creeping into my bones. I went back to the bedroom with quick steps, grabbed the small kitchen knife I used to chop vegetables, and held it tightly. The phone in my left hand, I tried to open the emergency app. The sound returned again, stronger this time. It was as if the lock were actually moving. I imagined a hand wearing a thin glove. Many questions spun in my head. How long would it take before he succeeded? Minutes or seconds? I sat on the edge of the bed thinking about escape options. The apartment is on the second floor. The kitchen window overlooks a narrow alley, but jumping might result in a broken leg. I heard light footsteps outside the door, then dead silence. The fear made me hear my heartbeat in my ears, and every muscle in my body was tense. Why me? And why tonight? I was thinking about all the small mistakes I had made, like leaving the entrance lamp off, or not installing a security camera as my friend had advised me. The minutes passed with agonizing slowness, and every second carried the possibility that the door would suddenly burst open. After minutes that felt like hours, I decided to call the police. I dialed the number with trembling fingers and whispered into the phone while hiding in the bathroom. The door closed behind me. I told the police officer in a shaking voice, "Someone is trying to enter my apartment." I gave him the address accurately, West Oak Street in the suburbs, and the apartment number. He said they would send a patrol within minutes, but in our area, the response was sometimes slow, especially in the early hours of the morning. I hung up the phone and went back to listening. The sound outside the door stopped suddenly, as if the person had heard me. Then I heard a very light knock on the door. 3 consecutive knocks, as if he were testing if anyone was there. I didn't respond. I started thinking about the worst. Maybe it's not a random thief, but someone who knows me. Was my ex-boyfriend trying to scare me? I don't think so, because he lives in another state. Or is it one of the strange neighbors I sometimes see looking at me in a weird way? I heard a sound like friction against the frame, then another faint creak. He was trying to use another tool, perhaps a scalpel or something, to lift the lock. I stepped out of the bathroom cautiously, holding the knife, and decided to stand behind the sofa in the living room, where I could see the door. The darkness was thick, with only a faint light from the street lamp creeping in through the curtains. Suddenly, the outside lights went out completely. My heart stopped for a moment. I heard the door shake slightly. I shouted out loud, trying to sound strong, and said, "Who's there?" But my voice came out trembling. I heard no response, just a terrible silence followed by light footsteps moving away slightly and then returning. I imagined the man outside, perhaps masked, wearing dark clothes, carrying a tool bag. In America, we hear about these incidents daily, thieves entering and robbing or harming the residents. I remembered a story I read about a woman in California who was killed in her apartment after the lock failed to keep the attacker out. Time passed and the police still hadn't arrived. I began to sweat despite the cold, my hands clammy on the knife handle. I heard a new sound. It was an attempt to pry the door from the bottom. The wood was groaning under the pressure. I approached the door again and looked through the peephole. This time I saw a shadow moving quickly and then disappearing. There was definitely someone there. I started praying in silence, thinking about my family and how the news of my death would be a shock to them. The next few minutes were the worst nightmare, scratching sounds, muffled sighs, and the feeling that time was running out. I imagined his hand entering through a small gap, then his whole body. Finally, I heard the sound of police sirens in the street, blue and red lights shimmering through the curtains. I sighed with relief for a moment and screamed at the top of my lungs, "I'm here! Apartment 2B! He's here!" As I ran toward the door to try and secure it more, but in those very seconds, the thief clearly heard the sound of the police from the hallway. Instead of running away, he decided to end it quickly. Perhaps he knew the building well, or perhaps he was desperate. I heard a sharp breaking sound, the security chain snapped, and the door flew open violently. The man entered like a beast. He was tall and strong, wearing a black mask covering his face except for his eyes. I don't think he was looking to rob. He wanted revenge or control. He attacked me immediately and struck me on the head with the handle of a metal tool. I fell to the floor, and then he kicked me in the stomach. I tried to stab him with the knife, but I missed in the dark. I heard the officers rushing up the stairs, shouting, "Police! Don't move!" But he had already broken in. In a crazed moment, he lunged toward the living room window, which was partially open, tore through the curtain, and exited into the narrow back alley, the alley leading to the iron fire escape. He was terrifyingly fast, and when the officers reached the apartment seconds later, he had disappeared into the darkness behind the building. I felt my blood flowing down my face. I woke up in the hospital hours later with a fractured shoulder and a concussion. The investigation stated that he didn't steal anything, and the street cameras didn't catch him clearly. The neighbors heard the noise, but were afraid to intervene. I now live in a different place. I change my locks every month, and I sleep with a light on and a handgun by the bed, after getting a legal permit. But every night, I wake up at the slightest sound and I wonder, did he know me? Will he come back when he thinks I've forgotten, and the police have closed the file temporarily, but I know he's still out there somewhere, watching, waiting, and locks are never enough. I had just finished a very long and exhausting day in downtown Chicago, and it was past 11 p.m. It was pouring rain. When I tried to start my car to go back home to the suburbs, the car didn't respond at all. I tried more than once, but it was just a click sound, and it wouldn't start. The battery must have died, or there was some malfunction I wasn't aware of. I had no choice but to order an Uber. I waited under the awning for a few minutes until the car arrived. A very ordinary silver Toyota Camry. The driver's name was Mike, and according to the app, his rating was 4.8. I got in the back, threw my bag next to me, and gave him the address for the northern suburbs where I live. The first 10 minutes of the trip were normal. The driver, Mike, started talking a little about the weather and the traffic. His voice was calm and friendly. But after 10 minutes, I noticed he had taken the usual I-90 highway. We passed through a narrow side street, then another, and the rain was getting heavier. I said politely, "Hey man, I think you took the wrong turn." He didn't answer. He just gave a slight smile in the rearview mirror and kept driving. My heart started pounding a little faster. The area became very dark, filled with abandoned factories and old warehouses. I saw almost no cars around us. I tried to open the app to cancel the trip, but the signal was weak. I said in a calm voice, "Mike, please take us back to the main road." This time he looked at me in the mirror with cold eyes, replied with a chilling calmness, and said, "I know a shortcut." That sentence was enough to freeze me in my tracks. I work as a software engineer. I live alone in the Chicago suburbs, and I wasn't carrying much cash, but I think Mike noticed my new phone and the expensive watch I was wearing. I tried to keep my voice steady and sent a message to my friend via WhatsApp. "I'm in a sketchy Uber. If you don't hear from me in 15 minutes, call the police." There was no signal. The driver sped up a bit. I noticed he was passing through red lights without stopping. Fear started creeping into my throat and cold sweat was running down my back, despite the car's air conditioning. Every time I looked outside, the streets were more deserted. Even the road signs had disappeared. I asked Mike, "The trip usually takes 25 minutes, and now it's been almost 45 minutes. Why?" A feeling grew inside me that the trip was going to turn into a nightmare. The driver remained in total silence after that sentence, driving as if he knew exactly where he was going. I tried again. "Listen, I just want to get home. If there's a problem with the route, pull over and let me out." He replied in a low, cold voice, "The road is safe. Don't worry." But his voice had something strange about it, as if he were smiling while he spoke. I secretly opened the Google Maps on my phone and saw that we were moving completely away from the right path. I also saw that we were heading west of the city toward abandoned industrial areas known for theft and violence. I pressed the emergency button in the app, but the notification said, "Connection issue." I thought about opening the door and jumping out at any slow stop, but the speed was high and the doors were locked from the inside. I noticed he had locked them. I started talking to him about anything, mentioning that I was married and had children, a lie, in hopes it would trigger something human in him, but he only replied with, We passed a police car parked on the side. I tried to wave at it, but the driver suddenly changed lanes to a narrower side street. I noticed he was wearing gloves, even though the weather wasn't very cold. I remembered a true story I read about in Illinois. An Uber driver kidnapped a woman, demanded a ransom, or killed her. My whole body was tense, thinking about how to defend myself. I didn't have a weapon, only the house key in my pocket. I tried calling 911, but the audio was cutting out. After about 20 additional minutes, the car stopped suddenly in a dark alley between two abandoned warehouses. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. I asked him, "Why did you stop?" My voice was trembling. He turned off the headlights and looked at me directly in the mirror and said, "Because we're here." At that moment, I heard the sound of another car approaching from behind. Fear made me break out in a sweat, thinking about my family, thinking that this might be my end because of a normal Uber ride. I tried to open the door violently, but it was locked. In a moment of pure panic, I slammed my shoulder against the door with all my strength until it flew open, and I ran into the darkness and rain towards some distant light. I heard the car door open behind me and heavy footsteps chasing me. The driver shouted, "Don't run!" I ran between the warehouses, breathing with difficulty, falling and getting back up, until I found a main street after minutes that felt like hours. A police car finally stopped after I waved at it like a madman. I told them everything, gave them the trip details and the car description. They arrested Mike about an hour later, but Turned out he wasn't the real Mike. He was using a stolen account. The real man had been killed days earlier. The fake driver was wanted in several states on charges of kidnapping, robbery, and murder, but he escaped while being transported, and he hasn't been caught since. I now suffer from nightmares every night. I don't take any taxi after sunset, and I always look behind me. The fake Mike didn't steal anything from me, but he made me lose trust in everything. Every time I hear the sound of a car engine on the street at night, I feel fear and anxiety. And I wonder, did he really escape? Or is he waiting for the next trip? Maybe me again? The doors never close tightly enough, and the streets of Chicago all look dark now. I ask everyone not to make the same mistake I did, and to be careful while ordering an Uber, so you don't end up kidnapped or killed. In Pennsylvania, I worked in a vegetable drying factory, and after a long and exhausting day, I felt the fatigue gnawing at my body. I decided to reward myself with a quick dinner. I left the factory late, the cold air stinging my face, and on my way home I stopped at a small fast food restaurant on the highway, leading to my neighborhood, the only place open at that late hour. I sat at a table near the window, eating my delicious meal, while watching the few cars speeding by in the dark. There was something strange in the air, as if the road itself were swallowing sounds and leaving behind a heavy silence. I finished my food quickly and went back to my car, trying to ignore that nagging feeling that someone was watching me. When I arrived home and locked the door behind me, the silence inside was even heavier. The lighting was dim because I like the calm atmosphere and I can't sleep in bright lights. I went to my bed and opened my phone to browse the news and social media platforms, reading some stories, until sleep overcame me and the phone fell from my hand. I woke up to my phone ringing at 2:30 a.m. in my small apartment in Pennsylvania. I was very tired after a long day at the factory, opened my eyes with difficulty and grabbed the phone. I saw an unknown local number. I answered in a sleepy voice. "Hello?" No one replied. I only heard light, regular breathing, as if someone were trying to listen to me. I repeated the same word. "Hello? Who is this?" The sound disappeared. I hung up and told myself it was a wrong number or some drunk person. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again from the same number. This time I didn't answer and switched the phone to silent mode. I went to sleep annoyed, and in the morning I found 3 missed calls from the same number, all between 3 and 4 a.m. I was busy at work that day, and at lunch, when I returned home to change my clothes, the ringing returned. I replied angrily, "Who is this, you trash?" Total silence, then I heard a faint sound like a muffled laugh or a sigh. My heart beat a little faster, but I told myself it was a stupid prank. The day passed peacefully until, at night, while I was watching Netflix, a new call came. I didn't answer. I sent a text message to the number haunting me. "If you call again, I'm calling the police." The reply was immediate, a message from the same number. "You're in the living room now, sitting on the blue sofa." I froze in my place. The curtain was half open, and the light in the living room was clear. I got up quickly and closed all the curtains, my heart pounding in my ears. How did he know where I was sitting? I lived alone in the apartment. I started searching everywhere. Under the bed, in the closet, even in the fridge, like a madman. The silent calls continued almost every hour, and every time I felt like someone was breathing on the line. I'm a regular factory worker, 34 years old. I like to live quietly away from drama, but now every shadow in the apartment became terrifying. The following days turned into a living hell. The calls increased, and every time this person knew very precise details. Once, while I was at the supermarket near home, the phone rang and said, "The basket has milk and a frozen pizza box. You're gonna walk back on the right sidewalk." I looked around. The store was full of people, but I didn't see anyone looking at me strangely. I abandoned the basket and got into the car quickly, trembling. I reported it to the police, and they investigated the number. They said it was a burner phone, impossible to track easily, and there was no direct threat to open a full investigation. Probably a prank or a jealous ex, they told me, but I knew the matter was bigger. One of the calls came while I was at the gym, and the voice said calmly, "Your sweat is dripping on your forehead. You're wearing the gray t-shirt that has small holes under the armpits." I was actually wearing that t-shirt, and no one was near me. I started changing my routine every day, leaving work at different times, returning via side streets, and I even slept at a friend's place twice. But the calls followed me. Once, early in the morning while I was drinking coffee in the kitchen, the ringing came and the voice said, "The coffee is too hot today. You added extra sugar like you usually do." I looked out the window and saw a black car parked on the other side of the street, but when I looked closely, it disappeared. The fear became physical. I couldn't sleep more than a few hours, constantly waking up to check the door and windows. I changed my number, but 2 days later, the new number started ringing in the same way. How? Someone must have been following me for a long time, stealing my data, or maybe it's an old friend, or a neighbor, or even a colleague. I thought of everyone I know, but I couldn't find an answer. The police said they would put a camera on the street, but that takes time, and in our area, these crimes are frequent, and they don't pay much attention. I felt like I was being watched 24 hours a day. Even when I went to the bathroom, I would turn off the light and sit in the dark. The terror isn't just in the calls, it's in the feeling that someone knows my life better than I do. On a rainy night, 2 weeks after this nightmare began, things reached a breaking point. I was sitting in the living room, lights off, and the call that came tonight was different. The voice spoke for the first time in long sentences. "You're sitting in the dark right now, very afraid. The back door isn't locked properly." I jumped up like a madman and ran to check. I found the door actually slightly open and the rain coming in. I closed it quickly and called 911, my voice trembling. The police said they would arrive within minutes, but in those minutes I heard light footsteps outside the apartment, then a faint knock on the door. I didn't answer. The call returned, and the voice said, "I know you're alone. No one will get here in time." I heard the sound of a key trying to enter the lock. I took out my gun, prepared to shoot, and hid. The officers finally arrived, entered the apartment, and found me sitting on the floor, trembling, but the person had escaped via the back stairs. They found no trace except for a muddy boot print. The investigation revealed that the number was linked to a fake account, and this man had been following me for months via social media apps, and he might have been someone who worked with me long ago and went insane. They arrested him days later, but he was acquitted due to lack of evidence. Now I live in another city. I legally changed my name, and I live under an alias. But every night I find a missed call from a new number, silent, and I know he's still following me. No one fully believes me, and the police have closed the file. I am alive, but not living. Every phone ring freezes me, and I wonder when he will appear again, and whether the next time he'll be closer and rob or kill me. I don't know what to do, and I can't get out of this cycle.